Hi again, this is Joseph doing another tutorial how to identify components. Now everybody's familiar with the brake system in a car, so today we're going to focus on a few things. How to identify the components. We all familiar with the basic master cylinder, which is right here, with the fluid, contains the fluid. Now over here is the level switch that tells you in the instrument panel if your level is low. Now if we know the connections to it are these pipes going to controlling the level, the pressure and the level of the brake fluid. So we'll go back to the brakes, to the wheels. But before that, let's concentrate on something. There's something called a vacuum booster. Now how do we know to identify a vacuum booster? Number one, and there's also something called electronic brake control module. This is the electronic brake control module. How do you know? Well, the top of it has electronic parts, the module. If we're not familiar, we look at these lines. So we try to figure out what this component is. Well, by elimination, can it be related to fuel or fuel pressure? So as I said before in the other ones, always look where it's coming from and where it's going. If you follow these lines, first of all, there's a lot of lines, obviously, and brake lines, you know, are stainless steel, galvanized. So over here already you see 3 lines coming out of it. That means it's controlling some pressure. Now it can't, if it would be fuel lines, guess where it would go? It would go to the fuel rail, which goes to the fuel injectors. But if you look at it and you search it, you see where it's going to. It's going here. It's going right to the brake system, which goes to control the wheels, the ABS. So in other words, it'll pump the brakes. If you slide and you have no control, you lose your traction. And sometimes if you lose your traction, you lose your steering, which is not obviously a dangerous situation. So ABS helps you. It helps you at least gain your steering back by controlling fluids. So therefore, as we can see over here, this is electronic. You see the wires connected, the module, and you see there's a motor, a pump inside, controlling the fluid pressure going to the brakes. And there's speed sensors that go to this module to tell it which tires have lost traction. Right, 4-wheel speed sensors. Now once we identify that, we said okay, it's not related to fuel, because the fuel, if it would be a fuel, it would go in that direction of the engine to the fuel rail over there. Well, it's not going that way, it's going this way. That means it's going to the wheels, so it has to do something with brakes. That's how you figure things out. Now we spoke about a vacuum booster, where a vacuum booster is usually next to the firewall, and when you usually, if you do change pads or things like that, the brake level will be hard and high. Well, once you turn on the engine, guess what happens? Vacuum comes from the engine, and your brake pedal goes back to the ground. So in other words, to identify the components, if this is a vacuum booster or a brake booster, that means it would be related somehow to the master cylinder. The idea of the vacuum booster is to multiply the force from the pedal to the braking system, so we can stop the car. Now we know vacuum booster means there's vacuum to it, as I just explained. Therefore, if it is a vacuum booster, let's identify and try to see. That means it has to be a vacuum line. Well, if you look over here, see this? See this? This is going to this. That means this should be going to the engine, which it is. If you look at it, it's going to the engine. So therefore, we can assume that this is a brake booster, a vacuum booster, as they say. That's how you identify parts. Now, so that's part of the braking system, not all of it, obviously, but that's how you identify it. Now let's, in the other one, the previous video that I explained, how to find sensors and other components. Well, someone sent me an email, how to find out components. Well, We spoke before that mass airflow sensor, this is the air chamber. This is where fresh air comes in. We do not have mixed fuel air right at this point. That happens at the combustion chamber in the cylinders. So this is fresh air coming in. So therefore, to identify intake air temperature, like we said before, has to be next to the air chamber, the air inlet ducts, as they say. Mass airflow sensor has to be 3 wires, which I explained before in the other video, and also has to be around the air flow system, getting in new air. Now let's say if I'm not familiar with these components, as someone asked me. Now there's coolant temperature sensor, there's oxygen sensors, map sensors. How do I know that's not an oxygen sensor? We know oxygen sensors, post catalytic converter, pre-catalytic converter, come after the exhaust. That means after combustion has taken place. You want to see how much oxygen came from the air-fuel ratio, the air-fuel mixture. Whether it's an open loop or closed loop, doesn't matter. In open loop, the PCM, the computer, does not look at the oxygen sensor yet until the heating elements have been, the heaters have been heated enough, got hot enough. Then we call that closed loop. Nevertheless, how do I know this is an oxygen sensor? Well, oxygen sensor will not be in the airflow system. It will be after combustion has taken place. Therefore, the oxygen sensor would be by the catalytic converter. And to have proper emissions, you have to have proper pollutants. You have to have proper emissions of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, which is CO2, carbon monoxide is CO, proper hydrocarbons, which means you have raw fuel, oxides of nitrogen, oxygen. All these things give you proper emissions so we don't pollute the air, the environment. So this cannot be, we just determined now, this cannot be oxygen sensor. How about coolant temperature sensor? That's someone asked me. Cannot be coolant temperature sensor tells you how hot the engine is getting. So therefore, it will not be by the air chamber. It would be by the engine. How about map sensor? Well, the map sensor would be by the engine. Why? Because it measures the vacuum based on load conditions. And what do we mean by load conditions? Opening throttle, closing throttle. You're changing the vacuum compared to atmospheric pressure. So therefore, those sensors would be by the engine. Oil sensor, oil pressure sensor, where would that be? That would be also by the engine. So therefore, you can only assume out of process of elimination, when I see these sensors and I see an airflow system, this has to be related to air. And the only sensors that are there are intake air temperature, which has 2 wires, mass airflow sensor, which has 3 wires. Therefore, I can determine those are related to air. And those are the sensors related to air. So that's how you go about it. Like I said, ignition control module. How do I know it's ignition control module? Well, I have an ignition coil over here connected to it. Therefore, it has something to do with spark. Therefore, I can identify this module over here with spark. And that's how you go about it. Other thing is, with the serpentine belt, I'll go over other things also. Yeah, there's ribs, and you have to check the ribs. Make sure there's no cracks and things like it. Make sure when you put on it, it's stern. When you put force on it. And like we said before, idler wheel, alternator, obviously, and all the way on the bottom. How do you know? Well, the biggest pulley is the crankshaft pulley. How do I know that this is not a crankshaft sensor? How do I know it's not a camshaft sensor? Determining the RPM or the revolutions. Well, because that would be by the crankshaft sensor, it would be by the camshaft sensor. Those type of sensors. It will not be by the airflow system. So that's how you determine. You just see where it's coming from, where it's going, and you use this process of elimination. So I hope this video was helpful. Please subscribe to my channel if you can. I have my channel called Automotive Electronic Schematics by Joseph. I hope you'll find something to your interest, and we'll be doing other things, identifying other components under the hood, so you're familiar. I'm trying to do something that's not been done on YouTube, is to identify a component. We all know where oil stick is and battery is. We all know those things, right? So therefore, I'm trying to do something new and fresh on YouTube. I hope you found this, like I said, informative and helpful. And remember, throttle body is under here. Throttle position sensor would be under here. Wherever the throttle body is, that's where the TPS sensor is. And you would have an electrical or harness going to it, so you know it's electrical connection to it, like over here. Just like over here. Okay? Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time.